particular, let me say, a young person in the Bahamas today, first of all, tell me, ladies and gentlemen, are there business opportunities in this country?
Oh, for sure. I could think of any number of opportunities, but I won't give them all away because I end up doing it now that I have some time.
But before you go for it, so Darnell Osbourne agrees that there are business opportunities in the country. Mr. Bacardi?
I agree.
Mr. Bacardi agrees. John Wilson?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's establish that they are out there. They're out there. I'm gonna, Mr. Mora, are there business opportunities?
Definitely.
The chairman of the Chamber of Commerce says so. And so there are business opportunities. Now, Mrs. Osbourne may not give them away. Give us a couple, man.
Well, what I'm saying is,
okay, give us industries where you think these opportunities
I think
exist.
there are tremendous opportunities in technology.
Okay, technology is a space. Are y'all listening? Y'all students, you're listening?
Right.
Okay.
And in fact, not even going into my head to think of ideas, I have seen some very interesting new businesses.
Okay.
That young entrepreneurs have started. Like you have, and I could not free advertisement, but I don't care. Anyway, give them a boost. Like the POW, this new Duff thing. You have Conk and a Cone, but
Conk and a Cone?
Yeah, there are several new innovative things, but the problem in the Bahamas, as I see it.
Don't give me the problem yet. Don't give me.
I will tell you what the problem is.
We will isolate. These opportunities.
But you see, the opportunities at that level, bear in mind, are very low cost startups.
Okay.
That's what I want to point out. The problem for the masses in this country, for business, is the lack of venture capital.
Okay.
Okay. If you notice, John is a partner in the law firm, and now he then owns Menchie's.
Okay, we want to get to the capital, because that is true. But we want to talk to how we might be able to fix that problem. But that technology was one sector where opportunities exist. Any other sectors you see opportunities?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
Yeah. Given the opportunity, we have to now figure ways to feed ourselves. Serve our own interests without 90 cents or 80 cents of every dollar being exported. We could never build a sustainable economy that way.
Okay, so manufacturing is one area. Now, there are any number of people who talk about the cost of labor here being an impediment to manufacturing. You don't see that. You see that there's still manufacturing opportunities.
I do, but that would have to go hand in hand with some governmental changes in terms of how they approach manufacturing.
Okay, so we got manufacturing technology.
Medical tourism and wellness centers, I think might be.
I think that's huge. Wellness centers, I think is huge. Okay.
Eco lodges, family island, building up, our family islands.
You know what's happening in the family islands now? I suspect it's happening in Nassau, but I don't know that as well. Is lots of duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes and sixplexes and the like are being bought up by people who are now in the Airbnb business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening like that in some of the territories that I know. So that's obviously a business opportunity. So we conclude that there are business opportunities here. Now, we've already isolated one of the impediments to seizing on that opportunity, which is access, and she said, to venture capital. She didn't say to the government money, the venture capital, right? But if the business opportunity exists and venture capital is a challenge, is there not a business in the venture capital provision?
Yes, but culturally,
You first need venture capital to provide venture capital.
Right, so that's my point. I'm saying
you need it, but
I'm saying that $3 billion sitting in the bank, which I was just talking to some
here.
folk at the central bank. And there's billions of dollars sitting in the bank. We know it's Bahamian owned, so they're saying that's money.
But you see, you have to be a risk taker to want to lend the money for business. I mean, we all know I can go and get $100,000 for a car or whatever. but if I say I want 100,000 for a new business, then I have to bring the land, I have to bring everything else.
But the money the bank will provide is not venture capital.
True.
So
that's the only
because they're less risky, the banks.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying, that's usually the only source.
Avenue, right.
An avenue.
Okay.
I mean, that's the reality. And then on top of that, you also, I started to make the point, and not to pick on John, but I can pick on myself. He's a partner law firm. I'm an accountant and a long career in offshore and insurance. If I did not have the income coming in from those jobs,
Might have been harder to make that decision.
almost impossible, because when the opportunities arise, right, when they come up, not that you don't have a good idea, many of these kids may have great ideas, and they may need to jump on those ideas, but if they don't have the cash or the access to capital, then the ideas go to the grave. And you have lots of money, on your last point I'll make is, in the bank, yes, we have behemoths with money, but are they taking the money to invest in providing venture capital for the masters?
So two things, and I have a question for you, two things. One is it a good idea for the government to be coughing up this money for Bahamian businesses to Bahamian business people to get into business? Is that a good idea? Is that good policy?
No.
It's a bit of a risk, but you may need to balance that with some private money. But then, if the private money is not coming forth,
Let's isolate the government money first.
Yeah.
Let's isolate the government money.
Sorry.
We know we have the Bahamas Development Bank. We know we have a venture capital fund. We know we have some micro lending facilities the government utilizes in terms of self-starter. Is that a good idea?
No.
Good policy idea for taxpayer money?
No, not at all. Not at all. For the simple.
How many of our audience think it's a good idea for the government to be getting in the business of capital lending or giving? Raise your hand if you think it's a good idea. I don't have a single hand among the students. Among the students, I don't. All right, yes, sir, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, no, I mean, the hard reality of it is that the government cannot get those individuals who got government funded loans to come and repay it and pay it forward so that other students can go on. That's a problem, right? I mean, if the government, like the Bahamas Development Bank, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I don't think the Bahamas Development Bank ever turned a profit. Right? I don't think.
No.
So as a government policy, I mean, it's a bad.
The track record of government investment in entrepreneurship, if you are looking for returns, the track record is abysmal. That's for sure.
Correct. So what the role the government should play is to be facilitated, right, and to incentivize small Bahamian businesses to try and open up. I mean, you don't have to give every exemption to the big anchor projects, right? We should try to build a community of entrepreneurs instead of a community of maids and housekeepers and food attendants.
But to be sure now, the vast majority of manufacturers, local manufacturers in this country, farmers in this country, etc., have access to every single exemption program that is available to an international player. Listen, this is an area in which I worked for many years. Many years. This isn't even for the doubtful. You have hundreds registered under the Industries Encouragement Act. Hundreds registered under the Tariff 8 provision, the Item 8 provision of the Tariff Act. You have scores registered under the Hotels Encouragement Act, because each one of those laws only call for approved investor. They don't distinguish in terms of foreign or Bahamian. But what is true is that very often other things surrounding doing business in this country for a local entrepreneur frustrates their ability to maximize those.
Right, I mean, absolutely. And in facilitative, if you remove the customs import duty, right, off of imports where you have a young local Bahamian seeking to set up a business, right, you'll find that you have more businesses being set up.
Right.
Okay, you speak about the Industries Encouragements Act, right? I mean, yes, it provides an incentive, right? But on the same token, the government then asks that young Bahamian to go and secure a bond,
Yeah.
right? To cover the cost of his imports, right? So he's then has to go to a bank, right? And say, okay, he's importing $250,000 worth of product, and customs duty on it's gonna be $70,000.
Or he's bringing his products and their issues related to that.
Precisely. He has to go to the bank, right, and say, commercial bank, I need a bond. You know what that commercial bank is gonna tell him? I'll give you a bond if you put up the $70,000 in a fixed deposit account. It is no real access to the average Bahamian. None at all.
Okay, so the question of government putting money into entrepreneurship, venture capital, is not a strong, positive, I think, point here. But even if it were doing so, and it does do so, it's never going to be sufficient. So what could be done to have more private venture capital step into the market somehow? I know Mr. Stubbs is here, and he's a part of a grouping that's doing some of it. But what might, because risk is the issue.
Yeah.
What would motivate more Bahamians to free up their capital to put in venture? What can be done to mitigate the risk? What do you think?
Well, there's two things that you invest in. One is people, and two is ideas. You can have a wonderful idea, but who's behind it? And so I think that if a particular project was presented to me, or one of us are here and say, hey, listen, I'm looking for $10,000, $20,000 here to invest in this particular idea. Would you go behind it? Well, I'd like to know what your track record is. Where have you worked before? Mr. Osbourne just said I had 3 or 4 different professional jobs before I even got into the entrepreneurial world. So someone's already invested in you because they say, okay, I've seen your track record. So yes, I'm going to invest in this platform because I've seen her track record and I like her idea.
Let's pin right there. And I want you to hear that. I want you to hear that if you're listening today by radio, if you're in here as an audience. He's saying, yes, you could have a great idea, but mitigating that risk so that I might be more motivated is a question of who are you going to use to execute that idea. So maybe that's not you. Maybe you don't have sufficient background for that. But then that means you should find some people who do and say, listen, man, I need you behind this project. Right? So that's one thing, is improving the leadership, the management that's going to execute the project. What else might be done to encourage, say, entrepreneurs, private entrepreneurs to do so? Yes, Mr. Moore.
I think if you had a banking representative here, they would say that the absence of a solid business plan is probably the greatest hurdle to whether it's a bank or a venture capitalist advancing.
So you need a solid business plan. Now I noticed you said a solid business plan and not a pretty one. Because some people think that if they have nice graphs and laid out and have all the points covered, that's a solid business plan, eh? But a solid business plan would constitute what? What would a venture capitalist, a Bahamian investor be really looking at in that plan to say, you know what, I could get behind this?
I think, define why is it an opportunity.
Okay.
Have you done your analysis? Who are your competitors?
Okay.
What are those challenges? What are the what ifs? If this happens, what's the consequence to this business idea?
Okay.
I think it's kind of running through, all of the various scenarios.
Real details.
Real details.
So what's behind the numbers? Don't tell me you can sell 50,000 units because you pulled that out of a hat. There has to be something that led you to believe it is conceivable in your first year, second year, third year to sell 50,000 units. So if you're listening out there, these business people are saying that on top of who's going to be behind this idea, executing it, is a good business plan. And that business plan has got to be about real details so that when you are asked a question, you're not fumbling or stumbling. Now, if you can't answer that question, and you should be able to, you better go get the accountant who helped you, right? And let them answer the question. Anything else that can mitigate the reluctance of a person to invest in a new idea, an entrepreneurial project, beyond the people to execute a good business plan?
I think, and I think if you're just starting to see this idea of the credit bureau, for those people who may, not the students obviously, who probably have no loans, but at the end of the day, you need to look at their track record of paying back. And that's where the credit bureau would come in to play. And perhaps that may encourage some venture capitalists to come forward. But we have a serious problem with that in this country, the lack of matching the skills and whatnot to the capital.
Isn't it also true that venture capitalists like to have control of their situation, so they may want to take a role even if it's for just a short time? So maybe a part of mitigating the risk is saying, listen, why don't you participate? You can have management control for X number of years until you buy out and so forth, and that might help, because one of the challenges I've heard is that Bahamians want you to put your money in, but they don't want to give you no ownership.
Yeah.
Right? And so maybe that's another way, if you're listening, is to say, listen, for your participation, I'll give you X%, and you have got to be able to value the percentage of the shares too. And that's, so it's required, I think, for there to be some thinking through all of that, right? All right, so that makes sense? I see some of these folks shaking their head. When you all come to me, give me 10%. Let me ask you now, let's switch a bit. And the government, if government people are listening, see, we didn't talk with you all too much. That's true, the round table. But let's look at the government. Let's look at our policies, public policies, because what are we doing right? What do you think we need to do better?
Well, there has been some movement in terms.
And I'm sorry, and I mean right over time. I don't mean right the last 2 years, 3 years. I mean right over time, because you've been operating in this environment for years.
I think that over the years, I mean, there have been some things that have helped. I'm not in complete agreement with John in terms of the government not putting its money to like development, but I think the problem is enforcement and the discipline and removing the politics out of some of these things, and also having better skilled individuals in these institutions like Bahamas Development Bank and the others, who are able to assess and analyze good business ideas. I faced several times where we had to go to the bank and we had to do the calculations for them. And then you also have a trust factor then also with Bahamas Development Bank. I had another incident when we were about to purchase a franchise, the first one, and then the franchisor had all the calls coming back from, I guess, the people in the bank. So, you know,
they saw an opportunity.
Yeah, you see, so there's the trust factor, the lack of confidentiality, the lack of skill sometimes, the lack of enforcement, because I don't think it's a bad idea. If the private sector is not putting its money forth, in some way the government has social responsibilities, has responsibility to the citizens. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think the enforcement is the issue. And I think in recent times, the government seems to be moving towards making, most recently, the business license. Now, that was after some serious pushback from the accountants, but they've made it easier to renew your business license. And so
the move to get rid of the requirement to have a letter from the National Insurance Board that said you were in compliance before you were able to get your license renewed, you thought was good policy.
I think that was good policy.
Okay.
And but that's only for businesses in existence already. That doesn't help with the establishment of businesses. And then even though that is one avenue of assisting, but then you had another government policy that has not been good for businesses, is the collection of the garbage, which has increased the cost now for businesses. So Yeah, somehow the government has to find a balance. It's a thin line, you have to have a balancing act. But I think overall, public policy needs to move away, good public policy move away from the high cost of operating here and the high taxes. The high, I would say, inequitable taxes. Now that has been good for the government in the sense that it's been able to collect a lot because of the ability to check, but it has put less money in the consumer's pocket, right? Whereas income taxes would have been more, I guess, well, I'm just throwing it out there, it's the reality.
No.
It is, it's reality, because the people, for example, who shop at Dairy Queen, for example, right, they have less money in their pockets, okay? So, whereas they may have had a bit more had you gone to progressive income tax. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
That's a part of the discussion for the policy.
Lower my price of energy, I'll give everyone a raise.
I said that earlier, I said that, but you know, I don't want to.
Okay, so we've got, this is the Government and Public Policy Institute. I am barred to hold from holding any discussion here in relation to policy. The fact of the matter is, the tax policy is an issue that the business community in the Bahamas and the government of the Bahamas are going to have to come to terms with in terms of whether or not it is an impediment to or a facilitation of business in the country. Everywhere in the world, this is a question. Is the tax policy of the Bahamas conducive to good business, or is it not? And so, and what tax policy would be is a question, right? And so it's a fair question to raise. Then the cost of energy.
Yep, PLT. Yeah, I mean, he talking the cost of it. I mean, what the government is doing right? At the moment, right? They're making concerted effort to make doing business easier in the country, right? That is helpful. Centralizing all government services, is very important, helpful, right? But the primary impediment to doing business in the Bahamas and making a profit is they have to control the cost of energy.
Okay, and there is the major energy supplier in the country is government owned. And is there anyone who believes that it is something that the government or that supplier is doing that is keeping that cost higher than we need it to be?
Yeah, I think it's the suppliers. I think they're just taking advantage of small countries.
You think the suppliers are taking advantage, that we are just not getting good pricing? It's not a question of our scaling, you just think we're not getting a good deal?
We're just not getting a good deal.
Okay, well, how do you get a good deal? How do you get a good deal on pricing? How do you get a good deal on pricing? If you bid the thing out, and then you're bidding, this is what you get.
I mean, again, I don't know the answers, right? Because I've not been on the inside. But government just has to get more innovative. They have to look at other means of exploring how to reduce energy. It may be going to the commodities market. It may be, hedging on the fuel price, on the price of oil. I don't know, but they have to do something. I mean, we can't sit back here and you're trying to run a business and you're getting a $4,000 PPL power bill.
Yeah, I just think that, I think we all have to appreciate that for every year we wait, that is a real impact to our economy from a growth perspective. Whether it's $100 million in additional energy costs that we're all carrying as consumers and business operators, times the number of years that we haven't fixed it. And I think that, a challenge, and I don't pretend to understand just how significant or substantial our collective challenge is with energy. But what I do believe quite passionately is that the free market can fix most things. And I think that we are waiting for, we're not allowing the free market to do what the free market could do if it was allowed to enter the energy space.
It is our cost of cell phone services more cost effective now than it was prior to BTC's privatization?
Absolutely.
So competition helped. And so maybe it could help in the electricity to power space. Might that be a policy the government might pursue? Competition in the supply of energy. Because there are those, like myself included, who believe that a reduction in the cost of power can do more immediately and in the medium term for the growth of the Bahamian economy than trying to get six or a dozen more international investors.
Agreed. I mean, definitely. I looked at statements from, as an accountant, I looked at my own the other day, and I mean, we've got a 30% increase in energy costs, and you know, it wipes out some of your profit, a lot of it. So definitely the government needs to move quickly to correct this problem.
I think the other thing is that, you know, we are obviously a tourism-dependent economy, and the fact is that a plate of food here has to compete with the same plate of food in Fort Lauderdale, or Miami, or New York, or any other place. You know, and energy is a big part of that.
We got a question? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as a student and a consumer with limited purchasing power, right? If there's a reduction cost in the taxes for business owners, would there be a on savings to the consumers?
If there is a reduction in the cost of businesses, would that likely translate into lower cost for consumers? That's an excellent question.
It should.
Yeah, no, but it wouldn't necessarily, because if there is a reduction in the cost of doing business, then what you're going to have is, because everybody wants to increase their market share, right? So they will drive down their prices in order to be more competitive than the other person. And that will in turn force the others to bring their prices down.
But there are many Bahamians who believe that given reduction in custom duties over the years, that they do not see that translating into what businesses do in terms of those products. Is that your...
That happens, but you know what will eventually happen is they will go out of business because people won't buy from them, because nowadays, unless you really, I mean, how many clothing stores, for example, have gone out of business because you have online shopping, and if you're not competitive with your pricing, then people won't buy and you'll go out of business. So it's an incentive if the customs duties are lowered to bring your price down or keep it, certainly not increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Michael is absolutely right. The free market will fix it, right? It might take 6 months, it might take a year, but the free market will fix it.
We've got a text here says, Mr. Laing, what is missing from this dialogue is what the Bahamian people en masse deem as success. What do they aspire to have, and the means and ways to which they would like to achieve it? For instance, if young Bahamian persons could achieve what they deem as the dream of owning a home with a car and can purchase a modest level of entertainment, would it matter to him if they obtained a level of proficiency in some corporate office? I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was going someplace for sure, because it is true that what we define as success does matter. I thought the person was going to say, this is something you might want to consider. Many Bahamians, especially the ones who've been able to educate themselves beyond high school, are able to afford a fairly reasonably cost car, home, vacations, etc. Those are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then complain they can't find capital for business. But over time, if you get a $100,000 home, you can pay $200,000 in total to pay back the principal and the interest, which suggests that a $75,000 home could have put you in a position to get a $25,000, $50,000 investment for a business. And I thought that's where the person was going. But then they took a turn on me and ran to Bay Street. We have a next text here said, the reason government-assisted ventures is not such a good idea is because none of our successive governments have had a vision or plan as to where or what we as a country should go in 20 or 30 years would we still be lending money, or would we have something in place by that time? So that person seems to be pointing to long-term planning. Long-term planning. You think that this is a part of our challenge?
I have a question, Zhivargo. Within the university, is there a study that allows us to obtain the students' particular desires when they come out? Is there 40% want to become nurses, 30% want to become accountants, 40% want to become entrepreneurs in this particular field? Is there something that we, as the private community, as well as the public community, as well as governments, can say, what do these students want out of their own country? In the context that if we look at vision and what we want governments to do, you know, we have it behind tourism, as Mike said, as well as the financial sector for the last 60 years. What's the third platform? And where are we going to put it? And do we have a vision for Eleuthera the same we do as Freeport? Do we have the same vision for Abaco as we do for Andros? So I think that, you know, bringing this information together from a public-private practice and listening to the students that are coming up to say, what's the percentage?
Well, you know, interestingly enough, the easiest statistic to find here is what these students want to do, because their registration in those various degree programs is very well known to the university. We know that the vast majority of the students here in the undergraduate program are registered in what program? Business, sciences, and education. So yes, we can get you those information, we can get that statistics for you, because we know what these students are registered, what programs they're registered in, and I might say, what would be another good statistic is how many of them work in areas but are studying in other areas. Isn't that interesting? So you know, today you are in the bank, but you're in the nursing program. So that might say something too about where people's hearts are. But yes, I think that's a good thought, and we certainly could get that information. We're going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for listening in. You're listening to Z Live. We're here at the Business Roundtable at the University of the Bahamas, Franklin Wilson RBC Graduate Center. We're talking with Mr. John Wilson of Papa John's, BAF Financial, and Menchie's, Mr. Darnell Osbourne of Dairy Queen, and Mr. Juan Bacardi of Bristol Cellars. We'll be back after this break.